Hey, this is Ramon, channel is Alpha 4. Welcome back to my channel. As you know, I'm closing out my biblical series. Really enjoyed doing it, but it's kind of come at the cost of my channel's viewership. So I'm going to be closing out this Bible study with Revelation. So today we're going to actually look at the book of Revelation, and we're going to actually look at the way that it's interpreted. So what are the main methods for interpretation? Well, there's going to be the classical method, the American evangelical methods, and then there's going to be the academic methods. So first, let's start off with the academic methods. The academic methods are going to be the critical and symbolic. Personally, I identify with the critical method. That's what I use. But I think I've gone through almost all of these throughout my years of reading Revelation. Revelation was actually the first biblical book I read to completion. It's the book of Revelation that really caught my imagination. But the method that I most identify with and that I view Revelation through now, or interpret it through, is the critical method. And the critical method views Revelation within its cultural and historical context to derive its meaning and interpretation. The other method is going to be the symbolic method. And this takes a purely allegorical and metaphorical view of the text. Now, both of these views are going to be looked down upon by fundamentalists, by ultra-traditionalists, and by ultra-conservatives, are the radical traditionalists and radical conservatives. The most popular is the futurist or predictive. That is that Revelation is pure prophecy and has yet to be fulfilled. The futurist views Revelation as describing events at the end of the world. More specifically, they view chapters 4 through 22 as speaking of the distant future. Here, there are two major tracks who disagree with each other on the order of events. The post-trib, that is, they view tribulation, Armageddon, millennium, the new heaven and earth as the order of events, or the pre-trib, which will add in that it is going to go rapture, tribulation, Armageddon, millennium, and then the last judgment. If you ever watched any of those religious movies of the late 90s, early 2000s, that's kind of what this stuff is about. The next classical view we're going to talk about is going to be the Peterist. Petrist? I don't know. The word itself, the spelling of it, is very uncomfortable to pronounce. This is the view that Revelation is an allegorical and metaphorical chronicle of the struggle between early Christianity, Roman paganism, and late Second Temple, early post-temple Judaism. I know that's a mouthful. This is not an interpretive option open to evangelical Protestants nor to five-point Calvinists. So you're not going to find too many Calvinists or evangelical Protestants that ascribe to this way of interpreting Revelation. A preterist will usually claim that Revelation was written at its earliest possible date. This method of interpretation has a high and low theory, though. The low view is that Revelation is an historic account of the threefold clash between pagan Rome, Christianity, and temple-centric Judaism, told through analogy and metaphor. The high view, on the other hand, is that this work is deeply theological and represents the clashing of the Old Covenant with the New Covenant. So these are two different types of theology, Old Covenant and New Covenant clashing, and that's what this book or story represents. For some readers, the preterist view can hold the most weight, as it did for me for a very long time, as it accurately describes the tension of the synagogue church split. That is, these words, synagogue and church, used to be words for the same thing, that is, for the place of assembly, and they were once synonyms. But eventually they almost became antonyms as Jews expelled Christians from their congregations. And polytheists rejected Christians as dangerous subversives whom were possibly cannibals. This was a willful misunderstanding of the Eucharistic bread and wine that both the pagans and the more traditional Jewish culture purposely or willingly, readily misunderstood what the Christians were talking about when they would talk about the Eucharist. Remember that before this split, many Christians simply referred to themselves as Jews or the new Jew at that time. Think here of the term the New Covenant or the New Jerusalem and what that implies. For the preterist, if Revelation is predictive prophecy, then it is so relative to its writer, John, and the period and region that he lived in, that all or most of its predictions have already come to pass for us, the current modern reader. Meaning that by AD 120, the latest possible dating for this writing, all that was reported in Revelation had been fulfilled, or was fulfilled. Next, we get to the historicist. These people, or these view Revelation as a grand scale overview of both church and salvation history. They view the text as the actual history of the early Christian church, as told through symbolism, that the work is purely historical and tells the story of the early church up to the time of the writer's pen touching papyri, and that after a look back to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, the work then looks to the future to show the projection of things to come based on where we are, going from the Old Testament up to the writer's own time, then well into the future. If that, then, and this now, then this later formula. The next interpretive view or method that I would like to talk about in the classical style would be the idealist. And again, here is another view that I used to appeal to more often than not. The idealist views Revelation as a timeless message, chronicling the struggles within every Christian's life. The text conveys the ongoing cycle of cyclical history as event and type of event repeats itself over and over again. This takes the spiritual view that we are all wrong in taking a materialistic, concrete view of Revelation, but that it is actually the accurate description of what each and every well-formed Christian goes through as their faith matures and their body ages through life. It is the story of the spiritual warfare that you, I, and we all go through, being pulled between good and evil, called by both Jesus and the devil. And then let's take a look at some evangelical methods of interpreting and understanding Revelation. Premillennialism. This is the view that Jesus will come before the millennium and that the Old Testament prophecies will actually be fulfilled during the millennium. They also believe in a time of great tribulation before Christ returns. A pre-tribulationist is a premillennialist that believes that Christ will come back secretly before the Great Tribulation and then come back again openly after the Great Tribulation. Try saying that 5 times fast. Then there is millennialism. That's the view that the devil, or Satan, has already been chained up, and that the true millennium will not come until history ends. And then, after that, the new earth and the new heaven shall come. So first the world has to end, our time has to end, and then everything in Revelation happens. Okay, that's kind of the millennialist or millennialism view. Next comes postmillennialism. This is the view that Christ will return after the millennium. Many postmillennials think that Christ's reign is in heaven, not down here on earth, but that the Spirit guides the earth at this time through the church and the gospel, and that Satan is already chained up. But after Satan is released, Jesus will then return to earth to rid it of all evil and suffering. Again, here it is important to remind you that Revelation is also a liturgical work, written on a Sunday and meant to be read by a lector to an assembly at an attended church during a service. Worship is both part of the plot and the action done while reading the book. It is very meta. The saints under the altar pray with incense, while you pray with them by reading this work at the altar in the very church building they are interned in. Worship here is directed to both God and the Lamb, that is, Father and Son. The words of the text themselves are the very words and formulations used in Christian liturgy, specifically Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox liturgy. Incense, altars, lampstands, priest, vestments, gemstones, scrolls, trumpets, palm branches, libation bowls, and daily sacrifice, as well as hymns each reported in Revelation, are also each parts of the earthly reality of Jewish, Catholic, and Orthodox liturgical practice. Since we are talking about liturgy and the religion it belongs to, let's look at the broad claims and general perspectives different groups take concerning the revelation of John. So we kind of looked at broad views, the classical view, the academic view, but let's look at how specific factions within those groups actually view and understand the book of Revelation. So let's look at the secular understanding. A secular and academic take on the book of Revelation is that it is a work claiming divine revelation about future events, written in a time of regional and sporadic persecution against Christians within Asia Minor, that the book of Revelation correctly predicted, whether by foresight or unlucky guess, the later widespread and systematic persecution of all Christians within the Roman Empire, most likely composed during Domitian's reign, that is from AD 81 through AD 96, putting its composition after the Roman destruction of the Second Jewish Temple. Revelation is a carefully structured book with allusions to Old Testament imagery and events, written as a call for Christians to stand firm in their convictions against the pressures to accommodate and compromise with the dominant culture. Now let's look at the Greek Orthodox view of Revelation. For the Greek Orthodox reader, the Apocalypse of John is an uncovering of truths about, or uncovering of the single truth, about how the victory of the kingdom shall come, and a reminder to maintain faithfulness in the midst of tribulation. While liturgical in original intent, the Apocalypse of St. John is not read in modern day Orthodox service, as Revelation has been twisted, sensationalized, and misinterpreted as early as the 2nd and 3rd century, and misused as a call for violence against Jewish Hebrews, pagans, and even against the church itself by both the misguided and the malicious. Now let's look at my tradition, how Catholics understand the book of Revelation, or at least try to interpret it. Also, traditionalists within the Catholic Church hold that the Apostle John, son of Zebedee, received heavenly visions along with instructions to record them in writing, written in a rough Semitic Greek style some 30 years after the gospel which bears his name became popular. Although traditionalists and conservatives will acknowledge that this is not the majority nor scholarly consensus, but they will acknowledge that this book does not yield its secrets without effort. Revelation invites its reader to further prayer and reflection, as Revelation is a message of hope. For Catholics, consider it a fundamental error to take Revelation as a literal set of predictions from the past about current events in our time. For Catholics, this book should not become an obsession for anyone. Any end time reading or prediction read into this text has been disconfirmed time and time again, and has ruined many lives in the process, and shattered many an individual's faith. Such readings miss the real religious message of the text. Revelation is not a newspaper from the future. It is a liturgical epistle written in the apocalyptic genre. It is the resistance literature of the oppressed. Now, for a completely different view, let's see how evangelicals or Baptists interpret this text. An evangelical would be comfortable saying that the book of Revelation is a confusing literary letter, much like the letter of St. Jude, composed with extensive apocalyptic and prophetic material. Yet an evangelical would not claim to be a historicist when it comes to understanding Revelation. For an evangelical, Revelation is most likely purely apocalyptic prophecy, referring to the end times, viewed through the lens of the problems and needs of the first century church. The book of Revelation for an evangelical is meant to answer those problems for John the Elder's time and to set the factors for the end times. So we're always living in the end times now, is basically what I kind of get from that interpretation. Then let's look at the last view that we're going to acknowledge today, which is going to be the Calvinist view. For a Calvinist, the author of Revelation is Jesus Christ. You heard that correct. The revelation is the unveiling of the spiritual warfare that goes on behind the scenes of perceived reality, all communicated through Jesus' servant, John. For most Calvinists currently, Revelation was written most likely around AD 95 or AD 96. John's visions are reports of the past presented to give portents of the future, making the book of Revelation both apocalypse and prophecy. It conveys meaning through symbolism and truth. Revelation is a warning against persecution, false teachings, and material opulence, and as well as material affluence. It is a warning not to compromise with paganism, idolatry, nor immorality. It is a call against cultural, that is worldly approval. For the Calvinist, the book is symbolic and literary, relating an indirect instead of a direct telling of truths, multiple truths. For them, that is for the Calvinist, the book of Revelation relates eschatological realities. There you go. So I was trying to keep this video under 30 minutes. I barely got there. Hopefully after some editing, this will be nice and clean. I hope you like this video. It's been a while since I've done one of these. It's good to see you all again. Peace, like, and subscribe. I will be trying to get through most of the book of Revelation. I don't know how many chapters I'm going to do. I'm hoping to do all the chapters of the book of Revelation. We'll just see how I fill it out and whether or not an audience shows up for this. I will be reading the book to you guys and interpreting and showing my understanding while I'm reading it. So I will actually be reading it to you from different versions of the Bible, as I own a bunch of translations, so might as well use them. Anyway, at the end of that, that will be the end of my biblical talks on this channel. I will still be doing Bible stuff in my personal life, and I will gladly talk about religious stuff here and there going forward, but I want to refocus my channel back to philosophy and martial arts as I am getting older and my channel has kind of stopped growing as fast as it was at one time, and I'd like to rebuild my audience. So peace, like, and subscribe. Talk to you all later. Have a great night. Hey, this is Ramon, channel this out before, and if you're wondering why the boxing doesn't seem right, there's a cat in my usual spot that I stand to do these kind of videos. Anyway, he's not gonna move.